What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 73 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Split Screen Games weekly gaming podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Boys are back in town, everybody. We're reunited.
Finally,
It's been so long. So long since we've all been together.
Man, you picked 2 awful weeks to miss, too, you know?
Oh,
Those
yeah.
big episodes. We missed you, buddy.
We really did, especially when it got technical.
It's for two good reasons. So, I'm back. Sadly, I missed 2 good episodes. We'll have to get Bob back on the show because I'd love to kind of talk about nerdy stuff with him.
He already agreed to a meeting of the minds, so we'll definitely have him back on at some point in the future. Probably when there's a new piece of hardware to talk about.
Yeah. I'd be interested, Steve, if you get a chance to ever listen back, if we butchered any of the stats and facts to see if...
I think we did good.
Episode where you're like, 6 is bigger than 4, so that's got to be the better one. It was like... it was like, okay, sure. I mean, I guess you're right.
Were we right on that one?
This fucking
bigger
guy
does usually mean better.
Whenever he misses the show, he's like, I'll put the notes together. Gives me no context, nothing. Gives us nothing, and he's like, oh, you said one number. You could have told us what you thought if you wanted.
Hey, that was Max's idea last week. That was Max's. Topic that he chose.
Yeah,
it was
but,
a good one.
You could write in and contribute.
From my side, I'll contribute now. Those are complete nonsense. That's not a leak. It was someone making it up on a forum.
Yeah,
and it's never going to happen.
Do you think I said that enough on the show?
I think so. Yeah, and it was just it's too high powered for that for a Steam Deck. You can't. They've already said they don't want to go above the 15-watt TDP, so there's no chance.
Well, anyway, we're not here to talk about last week's show. Let's talk about this week's show, because we're going to talk about the game that's on everybody's lips this week, Palworld, which is, of course, breaking records across Steam. And, we're going to talk a little bit today about how it plays on deck. We've had a couple people from the community write in with questions about performance and kind of, how it handles on our favorite handheld. Right. And I've been playing the game. I was gifted a copy by a friend of the show, Snackago, who you can go check out on YouTube. He's actually got a new video out that you can check out all about Final Fantasy 16 if you're so inclined. Thanks again for the code, buddy. And I have been playing the game quite a bit. We recorded an episode of Nintendo Noise that you can go check out now, where we broke down all the controversy around the game and kind of the ongoing accusations of plagiarism and, all of that stuff we've covered very thoroughly on that episode. So if you're interested in hearing our thoughts about that, you can go check that out over there. But when we recorded that episode, I had only put a few hours into the game, where at this point, I think, I'm probably closer to like 10, maybe 8 to 10, 12 hours in. So I definitely have a lot more solid thoughts on the moment-to-moment gameplay and everything, which I'm excited to get into in a minute. But before we do that, I think it's worth just giving you guys the context of how massive this game's launch has been, if you haven't been keeping up with the story. As of this recording, right, the game has sold 8 million copies on Steam in 6 days. That's not taking into account the fact that it also had a release on Xbox Game Pass and is available there. So we don't even really know what the full scope of the player base is, but 8 million sold copies in 6 days is obviously nothing to sneeze at. They've made over $180 million if you do your Steam math there, which I think
is
at this
probably
point,
like well over 200 million at this point.
Because that number was from the Nintendo Noise episode, where I think they had only sold 6 million copies. So at this point, they're probably well over 200 million made in just a week, which is obviously massive for any video game, let alone an indie studio with a smaller team, right? So the other big thing, right, that's relevant for our conversation here is that the number of concurrent players in the game, right, has become the second highest of all time in Steam history, beating out Counter-Strike 2 and putting it only behind PUBG at 3.2 million. Its current record is 2. So, obviously the game's only been out for a week and it's continued to get attention. So the idea that uh, you know, that it could take the top spot and hit that 3.2 million is still absolutely in the cards.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously, I've said it already, but it bears repeating. I think what a huge win this
Oh
is for
yeah,
that team, right? Like this game has set the world on fire out of
yeah.
nowhere.
I think when it was first announced, and I know you've already discussed this, but when it was first announced as like a Pokemon with guns, and I remember looking at the trailer and thinking, all right, okay, one, there's no chance this releases if it really is going to just do Pokemon, but two, it's just going to be where does it go past that gimmick? And I think the fact that they've gone with a genre that is so endlessly popular, like survival games seem to be, Rust, Ark, all these games that never don't go anywhere, they're just always around. Um, I can see why it would have sort of quite a popular launch, but I do think that when you take that and you combine it with the attention that Pokemon has, it only really shows how strong the Pokemon IP is, as well as it shows how popular this game is. Um, but I do think that it is snowballing, and the more attention it gets, the more attention it's gonna get, and it's just gonna sort of like roll and roll and roll and roll really until we get to I don't know, like, is it gonna enter sorry, is it gonna come out of early access more popular than now, or is it gonna end up sort of staying this popular for the whole time? It seems to be just going from strength to strength, um, but yeah, I don't know if this has got legs. That's the big question. I haven't played it though, so Pete.
I mean, they've released their kind of roadmap, so at least I think people do have some kind of idea where things are going, and it doesn't seem like they're just gonna put the game out, run away with the cash like maybe they did with their last 2 games, right? We saw the AI game that we spoke the AI art game that we spoke about, and then they had that Craft World game. With this, they've got like a core plan in place that they're gonna
Well, and
address
the
the
player
critical
base,
issues
right?
first.
Like it's like the
Yeah, they've got
game
a
the game
player
is
base,
successful.
but they're planning on adding PvP, raid bosses, like an arena, and then also cross-play with Xbox, and they'll probably bring it to PlayStation. I would imagine PlayStation would want a popular game on their platform. So,
Oh yeah.
I do think it's got staying power. I don't think it's gonna fizzle out and go away, but it might not. It's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna stay at the heights it's at in terms of
No.
popularity.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
I mean, it
remember.
really depends on what comes next, right? Because I think what we're seeing right now could very, very quickly turn into the situation we saw with Halo Infinite, right? Where it's like the multiplayer had its like beta test weekend and everyone was like, holy crap, like this is really fun. This is Halo's back, and then you get through season one, which was kind of slow and not received super well. And then, it kind of has had a resurgence now and it feels like it's coming back, but obviously it wasn't able to maintain that momentum the entire time. You saw the same thing with Diablo 4 earlier this year, right? Where like it had a successful launch, it reviewed really well. And then when it came time to support it post launch, it stumbled. And again,
Mhm.
it seems like it's back on track. It seems like everything's cool now. So I think to your point, Steve, I think there's a very real chance that this game, you know, continues to grow and maybe it sets a new record for number one for these next couple, weeks as people get into it and they get new friends into it and they discover everything that it has to offer. But, we're very, very fast approaching a point where the extremely active player base is going to hit max level and they're going to fill out their PAL decks, the Pokedex, whatever. You know what I'm saying.
Hey,
They're gonna,
don't let the Pokemon here company here that they've already got a very close eye on this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, point, but like they're gonna hit that point where they run out of things to do, and we know for a fact that the Power World team is not a big studio, right? Like they are a pretty small
190
team.
million, like, I know Pocket Pair's, like, tiny, but you get 190 million, 200 million dollars, you can hire support staff.
Yeah, and
You can
and
get
I guess
people in
that's the
to give you a hand.
Yeah, and I guess that's the question though, right? Is like they made all this money, they have all this attention on the game. I'm sure they weren't expecting it to be as successful as it was. So like are they going to be able to bring people in and start scaling up in such a way that they can keep up with that demand and keep that player base engaged, even if it's not the entire player base, but enough of a player base to keep it healthy, long enough to get to that 1.0 and have a bigger proper release. like something like Baldur's Gate did, right? Where it came out in early access and it really excited people, and then it maintained that interest quietly over the course of several
Yeah.
years, and then it had a really big launch at 1.0. I mean, I think if this game doesn't run into legal trouble and all the stuff that we talked about on Nintendo Noise doesn't end up kneecapping it, I think that that's probably pretty likely because they do have all these resources now to hire more people and double down on the game and to try to develop new characters and develop new systems and come up with a roadmap for what does, like a season 2 look like and whatever, right? Whether that's adding to the map, maybe that's making new maps, all kinds of things that they could do with it, right? Um, and to Max's point, it's a thriving genre, right? Like there's clearly an audience out there for this type of game, and this is now currently the new most popular one. And that probably won't last, but it doesn't really need to be the most popular one to be successful and have staying power. It just needs to have, a dedicated base and a steady, content plan. And to your point, Steve, like they seem to have a content plan and, seemingly they were able to put this game together in a pretty small amount of time and it looks high quality. The idea that they could spin up other new stuff in a similar amount of time to keep people engaged is, I think, not unheard of, right? Like it's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of, you know, um, question marks there for sure, but I don't know. I mean, this could easily be a thing where they collapse under their own weight, especially if they do end up in a legal battle. Because I
Yeah.
think that's
I mean,
something where that $200 million is going to dry up really quick if you're trying to scale up your team and pay for legal fees. But
Yes.
whether or not that actually happens, I think is a really big if.
I think that people have misunderstood this statement, and I think it's also due to bad reporting. I think people have been probably hammering them constantly with messages and requests and sort of reports and
Yeah,
saying, "Look, they've stolen this, blah blah blah." Trying to get their attention for some reason that they haven't noticed this game exists. So Nintendo, also the Pokemon Company, have come out and said, "Okay, thanks for all your reports. We'll look
we're aware
into
of
it."
the situation.
Yeah, basically to stop people from constantly reporting it. But what
Yeah, I
people seem to
agree.
think that means or what the reporting is that Nintendo are actively looking for reasons to try and take this game down, which I don't think is the case. They took down that one, the mod that had actual Pokemon in it. They were charging for via Patreon. Yeah, fair enough. Take that down. People have tried to claim that this game has been they've already fought off Nintendo like twice, or the Pokemon Company twice before release, which I cannot see any evidence of. So I don't know where that information is coming
I
from.
think if that was the case, I don't think Microsoft would have, got them
There
on
was a
Game
Yeah,
quote.
Pass, would have it on their platform. I don't think Steam would have it on there. Like I
yeah.
mentioned on Nintendo Noise this week that only a few months ago we were talking about the fact that Dolphin wasn't allowed to be on the store
Right.
because it had like Nintendo's IP in there, and Valve contacted Nintendo to make sure they were
There,
okay with it.
there was a quote from the CEO that said that they had already been reviewed basically. Like they had their stuff reviewed for this sort of thing and that they basically feel like they are
Yeah.
legally in the right, which that's, I guess, going to be the question. But the point that I made on Nintendo Noise that I think is an interesting one, because I've seen a lot of people be like, well, they're not going to take them to court if they don't know that they can win. That's not that important. There is a rich history of companies taking smaller companies to court to bankrupt them, not because they think they can win, because they know that they're bigger and they have more resources than they do.
Mhm.
So like
Or
Nintendo and the
Peter Thiel taking people to court, just
sure.
bankrupting an entire news organization.
Right, totally. And the reality is that if Pokemon Company and Nintendo get to a point where they are just not willing to put up with this anymore, and they think that the press is annoying or that they don't like that a game that, is being associated with their child-friendly IP has, guns or this or that or whatever, like they could decide that it's worth it to take them to court for a few years and be confident that they will just not last through the battle because Nintendo has, we've talked about this all the time. They have like a war chest of like over $1 billion that they can spend and they could
Yeah,
go
but
to
we
court.
also spoke on yesterday's show, right, about who's going to be doing it. Is it going to be Nintendo? Is it going to be the Pokemon Company? It seems like maybe we have an
Probably a joint
answer
effort,
now
I would
that
imagine,
it's
right?
yeah, it's
Because
going to be across all of them.
yeah,
Creatures, Game Freak, Nintendo. those three together as the Pokemon
So
company. But you mentioned, Pete, that you kind of feel this game looks quality and feels quality. What's your impression of the game running on the deck? I presume you're
yeah,
playing. That's why you're playing it. Like,
I played it
what's the
100%
kind of
on Steam
general
Deck.
feel?
Oh,
Yeah.
really? I
Yeah,
thought it
I've
okay,
I've
that's interesting.
exclusively been playing it on Steam Deck. So when I picked up the game, my initial plan was to play it on deck because, I figured that there was gonna be folks in our audience that were interested and would wanna know how it ran and everything. And my plan was I was gonna play it there and then probably boot it up on my desktop to like do a comparison or see like, if it was something that um just to kind of, I guess, be able to give people an idea of like where's the best place to play and like how much are you compromising if you're playing it on deck.
Mhm.
And specifically, we had Gazamondo over on the Discord, right? And say, anyone tried Palworld on the Steam Deck yet? I downloaded it last night. I really like it. Seems to run fairly well. That's been my experience so far, right? Like I said, I'm about 10 to 12 hours in. Um, I've experienced no problems, right? Like it has the playable mark on deck officially. And the things that they highlight as like being the problems or whatever that are not optimized are, I think, a lot of the very familiar ones that anybody that plays on Steam Deck regularly knows are not a big deal, which are the like sometimes you might need to press the Steam button and then X to open up the keyboard. And it's like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's fine. Like, and again, how often am I doing that? Like, not a lot. If I, when I made my character, if I rename a pal, if I, make a sign in the game for other
Yeah.
players, like it's a pretty small number of activities where that kind
But
of thing is coming up anyway.
thing with that is that on a console, you'd have to have a keyboard come up anyway. So all you're doing
Yeah.
is saying, "I'd like to use the keyboard, please."
Yeah, but
So
it's manual, and some people, I understand why Valve did it because some people might not have realized how to bring the keyboard up, and that
If you
there
don't
is
have
that
that
shortcut you
prompt
can
telling you
do.
that that's what the shortcut is, you would never know that that was
Yeah,
what it
you have no
was.
that
And
is
I
true.
clue.
totally, I get that. But I think my point is to agree with you, Max, is I think if you're a seasoned player, it's like no worries, right? Like that's an
Yeah,
easy
of
thing for
course.
me to contend with. Um, so to
There's
talk
a
about,
new thing on the Steam Deck compatibility thing, and I don't know how long it's been there. I want someone to tell me, either you two or someone write in. It's a single player gameplay requires an active internet connection, and I did not know they
I've never
flagged
seen
that
that
before.
before this game.
No.
I didn't know that existed until you just said it.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a new prompt. Yeah, I agree. So to speak on like the performance overall, yeah, I mean, the only thing I've run into that is not, to me anyway, like my perception of how the game is supposed to run and be experienced has been um the rare instance where there are a lot of models on screen. If there's a character that's far away, you get a little bit of that Pokemon Scarlet Violet thing where it's like, okay, like its frames are being cut by like a
oh
third or
yeah,
something like that or whatever. So it's like a draw distance thing, but like
Lego
again,
Fortnite does that. That is just a thing that games need to do
and
sometimes, and
it's
that's
and I
fine.
would say it's very par for the course for
Mm,
a handheld like the deck, right? Like you
yeah.
expect it to have that level of limitation. So I think
Mhm.
for me, like, yeah, like that, if that's the worst thing you're experiencing, which in my 10, 12 hours of gameplay so far, that's the worst thing I've experienced. Um, I think that's really good, right? Like I think that's where you want it to be. So yeah, I mean, I think it runs really well on deck. And I think if you're a fan of this style of game, like it's I could totally easily see why people are getting so sucked into it and playing so much of it. Because I was talking about it on Nintendo Noise. Like this historically is not really my genre. Like I've played The Forest and I've played a bit of Rust and I played a bit of Ark. Like I've played a number of these games, but usually I'm like the friend that gets pulled in by the friends that are playing more seriously, and I play for a couple weeks, then I'm like, all right, great. I'm good, right? This is not necessarily for me.
There are a
Um,
few games that I've done that with.
this game, I think, has a lot of things that make it a lot easier to get into if you have been alienated by that genre in the past. Like, for starters, there is a single player mode and you can toggle it online on or off. So, like, in the early stages of the game where you're trying to get your feet wet and learn the mechanics and play through the tutorial, you're not going to like have to worry about some high level player coming in and kicking your teeth in every couple minutes. So, like, that's something that I think it benefits from a lot. And the tutorialization is actually really, really good. Like it has a very good onboarding process of like your first goal is to like build this build like a crafting bench and like make your first couple items and like this is how you collect resources and this is how you do combat. And like by the time it was getting to a point where it was teaching me how systems worked, where it's like, okay, like you can have a logging camp at your base or like a mine thing, and you need pals that have those abilities to operate them. I was like, okay, like you taught me each of these systems in a vacuum to a point where you didn't actually have to tell me how systems worked. I knew how the individual things worked, and it was like it just clicked. And I was like, oh, like that's really smart. Like it
Mhm.
feels a lot like um the base building or something that you might get in like Cult of the Lamb or something like that, or one of those types of games where it's like it's the world, not world, like city building sim management type thing connected with a loop of combat. Because the way that
Mhm.
I've found that I'm playing the game is I have my base, right? And whatever, you're leveling your base up as you play through the tutorial, and the tutorial ends with you beating a boss that's like at the top of this tower or whatever, which I'm like just about to go do. And I probably am taking longer than I need to do it because I've just been getting into the systems a little bit, and I wanted to be able to talk about them a little bit more. And I think the flow has worked really well for me, like especially as like a TV game where it's like, okay, like I'm at my base and I have all my gear and I have like 8, I think now, pals that I can have at my base at a time doing different tasks. So I have like a couple that they have specific jobs where it's like, I have like a chicken that is like laying eggs so that I can keep having food being cooked so that all my workers are being fed. Right. And like I don't ever have to like feed them. It's just like it's on a I've built a system that maintains itself now. And then there's like some pals that can do multiple things. So like I have a couple that like can chop wood and move stuff and water plants. And then I have some that can move stuff and mine for rocks and then harvest plants, right? So I have like a couple of them that can trade off tasks as they like need to, so that I have just like this perfect machine where like wood is always being generated, stone is always being generated, food is always being generated. And then if I need to turn any of those resources into something else, right? Like to craft like the balls that you use to catch pals, right? Or like to craft like as you get down the line, right? You unlock like guns and all that other stuff, right? You need like to be able to smelt the rock into ore, and then you can take that and turn that into steel and like build nails and like all this other kind of crap, right? And I can see how each system is like simply building on top of the other. And when I say simply, not that it lacks depth, but that it's not as alienating as it's felt for me in games like Minecraft, for example, where it's like getting from that point of like, I'm in Minecraft and I'm chopping stuff down and I built my first house to I'm underground, I'm collecting redstone and I'm building mine carts, right? And it's like they don't and like I haven't played Minecraft in a long time. There's probably a better onboarding process now, but I
Much, yeah.
remember at the time feeling like I don't see how I get from where I am to where I'm going. Whereas I can look at this game and I'm looking at the stuff I'm going to be unlocking at level 60 or whatever, right? I'm at level, I think, 12 or 13 now, maybe. Um, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I can see how I'm building a base. And now, like, the next thing I'm going to unlock is like walls, right? And I'll be able to like build traps that go on the wall so that when monsters come and attack my base at night, all me and my guys don't need to wake up and go fight. I can have an alarm that goes off and this thing will happen. And like, the way that each system plays into each other system works really well, and it fixes a lot of the things I've historically not liked about these kinds of games, because I like that a lot of the like building and some of those like the management and stuff that you need to do in games like Ark to actually like unlock the cool dinosaur that you're going to ride around or whatever, right? Like so much of that is streamlined because the moment to moment gameplay of like running around the world and collecting things and fighting and discovering new monsters and stuff all feeds back into how you build your base. It doesn't feel like two different things where I'm like, I'm out collecting resources to build my base in a game like Ark, sure, but there is that real sense of like I also need to constantly be defending my base or it's going to get toppled over, right? And like I guess that is the case here, but because I'm able to learn and grow and like level up my character and build my resources offline, or not offline, but like in a solo world, it's made it a lot easier for me to orient myself in the gameplay and figure out like what are the things I want to be doing aside from the tasks it's trying to funnel me towards. Whereas I feel like most of these games do kind of have that inherent like we're just gonna drop you and like you figure it out. Like you build whatever base you want to build. Oh, in the forest, right? These guys keep coming and attack you at night. If you go and follow them, you can get back to their base. Or if they capture you, you'll wake up in their base. And then, but like this game is from the very beginning, it's like, hey, your ultimate goal of this tutorial is to get to the top of that tower and fight this boss. And we're gonna teach you how to be strong enough to do that. But how you do that is gonna be up to you and where your base is and how you're interacting with the world and which pals you're going and capturing to set up your systems and like what stuff you're going to prioritize building and everything is all like up to you, and it's like I think it's wide enough for there to be opportunities for discovery and player expression, but it is narrow enough that it doesn't feel like you step into this game with just like dozens and dozens and dozens of systems that you don't understand and you don't understand how they relate to one another. And that's a thing I think a lot of these games, especially in early access, right? Like often leave me feeling is kind of like, okay, like there's things here that I'm enjoying and ideas here that I'm responding to, but like to what end am I playing? Like how am I progressing? Whereas like in this game, there is such a steady path that I see I'm
Hmm.
following. And like it makes it more rewarding and it's easier to get in that like, oh, I'll do one more loop. I'll get one more thing built. I'll get one more. Oh, I need to get this item that I can only get if I go to this part of the map and fight this type of monster. Great. Let me head over there, do that, and I can set all this up. And then the next time I play, I'll be ready for my next thing. Like that loop is working for me. And I went from in Nintendo Noise this week being like, yeah, this isn't really my genre. I'm playing it for the show, whatever. Like I'm gonna put more time into it so I can talk about it too. Last night I stayed up until 3:30 and I didn't mean to do that. It was just like, oh shit, like I played this game a really long time, and I just got into it. And
It got you. It's got
yeah,
its teeth in you.
and I think regardless of the things I can point to and say like this works for me or this doesn't work for me or whatever, I still don't know that this is like my genre or a game that's going to be on my game of the year list or anything like that. But like it does remind me a little bit of how I felt with like a game like Cyberpunk, where I'm like, yeah, I'm sitting here criticizing it, but I finished it. So like obviously it's pretty good, right? Like I bounce off games that I think have cool vision and ideas all the time and I don't like them. Whereas like
Mhm.
clearly this gameplay loop is speaking to me or I wouldn't have done it for 6 hours in a row.
Yeah, I have games like that where I'm like, "Eh, I don't know if I'm really feeling this," and then, like you say, like, you 5 hours later, you're like, "Well, maybe I'm feeling it somewhat. I must."
More than I thought, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna, say the last sort of game of this or, like, the last survival game that I played Valheim, loved Valheim, waited for that new content to come out, which took so long to come out that eventually I just never went back to Valheim, right? V
Yeah.
Rising came out. Me and a few friends all bought V Rising. We were like, "Let's play this game." Um And then I found that, like, while I was enjoying some of the bits, I was enjoying the collecting new abilities and going to dungeons and stuff like that that you do in that game. What I didn't like, which is a core thing of the game, is building my base, having to be feeding like enemy parts into my base to keep it alive, or it will start to decay, and also be having to worry about other players on the server coming and destroying my shit. Right? That was the thing that I didn't like about that game. I wanted to play it like Valheim, where I was playing it single player by myself or with friends, where we could just hop in and out of the server together, do some work, hang out. The only threat we have is the enemies, and our base isn't like constantly dying because that means it becomes work. I have to log in every day to make sure that I'm feeding the stuff. Oh, I've got to go get resources, otherwise my base is just going to die. If I have a week off, I have to start again. Where does this game land in that sort of thing? I know you said
Yeah.
that you sort of once you get enough pals, they start to sort of feed off each other, and it becomes sort of it starts to automate itself in a way, and a lot sooner than a lot easier than Minecraft does, from the sound of it. Does this game allow you to have that downtime, or allow you to take that time out, or allow you to do things that aren't just managing the base, keeping it alive?
Yeah, and I think that's why I like it. It's like I think to me and like don't get me wrong, it's 100% a survival game. right? And if I was on a server, like if I turned on online and then my server was getting populated with other players and everything, I think it would immediately turn into what you're describing. And I think for the people that like that kind of game, that's great because it's there. But I think for people like you and me, the way I'm playing it feels a lot more akin to, like, I brought up Cult of the Lamb earlier, right? And like to me, that game is very much like it's a light base town building management type game mixed with a light roguelite. And I think this game feels like when you play on single player without, online, or I guess without collaborating with other players too, it feels to me akin to that same kind of base, management kind of sim game. Uh, but instead of combined with like the roguelite of it all, I mean, I guess it is still kind of like that, but it's like the third person open world Breath of the Wild style like action adventure game mixed with that formula instead. Cause like you have a glider, you have a bow and arrow, you have like a spear or all these other like weapons that you can like eventually upgrade. And like obviously I'm gonna get to a point where there's crossbows and guns and all this other shit. Um and it's like, I think the way that that plays out, like, it feels way more akin to just, like, that kind of, like, open world checkboxy type experience, but it's not that because, you're the one deciding what the goal is and what you're building towards, right? And, like,
Mhm.
what you wanna prioritize building out your base. So I think, if you like the moment to moment of those games that you described, but the thing that was turning you off was like, I don't want a job. Like, I don't want to have to treat this like an MMO where I have to log on and protect my stuff every day, right? Or every couple days or whatever, or have like a group of friends that are willing to maintain it, right? Like, I don't want to do that kind of stuff. I don't like
That's very
playing one
fair.
video game religiously enough to play a game like that the way you're supposed to play it. So this to me, I think in the same way that like I responded to Cult of the Lamb because it was like, oh, like I kind of like that it's a little bit of like a diet roguelite because I'm not the biggest fan of that genre sometimes, like I would have runs in Hades where I'm like, I love this fucking game, but like, man, I played this game for 2 hours and I made no progress. And like
Yeah.
that is frustrating. Whereas like in Cult of the Lamb, it was very easy for me to be like, hey, even if I have a bad run, like I got some resources that I can put into my town and I can spend 20 minutes here furthering my overall goals and then go back out and see what happens the next time. And like that's what I'm doing with this game, right? Like I am constantly venturing forward in the map to try to unlock new fast travel points. And I basically play until I die. And then I fast travel as close to my body as I could. I go and pick up my shit and then I try to run around and get home, and like that's kind of been the way I'm experiencing it. And because I am enjoying the base building stuff because that is making it's the roguelite of it all, right? Of like, well, I build out the base because when you build out the base, I have better weapons. So the next run is going to be more successful and I'm going to make it further, right? I'm going to see more of the map, or I'm going to discover new creatures, or I'm going to beat a new boss or whatever. Um, so I think it probably would speak to you in that way because I think that's kind of the thing that is working for me is that like it's taking the conventions of this genre that do work for me and presenting it in a way where I don't have to engage with the stuff that ends up, you know, like not even necessarily like turning me off because I mean I guess it is that ultimately, but it's also just like you said, like if you take a week off and you have to start over, it's like I'm not gonna do that. I just won't because it's
Yeah, that is
like
the fastest way to turn me off from a game.
I've achieved nothing then, right? It's like I've spun my
Yeah.
tires and like for me, I've always felt that like if I'm playing that, it's the reason I don't like MMOs, right? Like if I'm playing a game like that where the point is uh to not ever really advance, I want it to be like a prestige rank based game like League of Legends or Halo or something like that where like yeah, like the point of the game is to play a match and have fun for 45 minutes and then move on, right? It's not, oh, I need to play this a certain amount and get my dailies and feed this monster and do this, or I'm never going to
Yeah.
get the mount that I want and I'm not going to get this. And it's like the way you unlock everything is just on a standard skill tree as you level up. You get technology points, and then like rare technology points, and you like unlock these different new things you can build or craft as you go, right? And you get to pick what you choose. It's seemingly you can unlock it all eventually, but like, like right now, right? Like I found a pal that I was using and I found out that I could like make a saddle for it so that I could ride it. And I was like, well, great. I have this pals. So of course I'm going to craft this item because it'll materially let me get around quicker. There's like 3 or 4 other ones I could have crafted, but I didn't have any of them. So it's like, great, I'll pick this and I'll pick that. And oh, I want to build this incubator because I found a bunch of eggs and I want to, get some new monsters, and like that's what I'll prioritize. So I need this item. Okay, well, let me go here where all the water monsters are, that because I need this thing that they drop when they die, right? And just, you can kind of like set whatever. It's like the thing I like about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom of like, okay, like what am I doing right now? Like, what do I feel like doing today? I'm gonna clear out shrines. Great. Let me go in that direction. Or I'm going to fill out more of the map. Great. Let me walk off in that direction, And I've had situations where like I'm doing something and then I get sidetracked because I discover a new item or this other thing. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, let me shift gears and focus on that goal now. And I never feel penalized for that. It's always very easy to just be like, great. Like, I'm going to just chase whatever is the thing that is most interesting or exciting in this moment. And that lack of obligation, I think, is kind of what you're talking about, right? Like it lets you just appreciate the systems for what they are and kind of just have
Yeah.
this like low low stakes gaming experience where you can feel like you're having this nice steady progress. And I like about it a lot, and it removes a lot of the minutia, I think, of some of those games without removing the depth of the systems. And I mean, take my opinion on that with a grain of salt. As I said, right, I'm not the biggest survival person. I've not really gotten to the depths of a lot of what those games have to offer. Um, so maybe this will feel shallow compared to somebody who's like gone all the way in on something like Ark. But like, I think for me, that
I think
probably
that's how
speaks to
some
why it's
people,
successful, is that it is approachable. Go ahead, Steve.
which I think is why Pokemon's successful, right? It's like it's a stepping stone into JRPGs in
Yeah.
general. Like, so
So many
maybe
people like
Palworld just can
affectionately
capitalize
call
on
it
that.
baby's first JRPG,
Yeah,
right? Like
it is. Yeah.
it's a gateway drug,
Some people apparently don't think it was easy enough though, because they put a statement out saying that some players were confirmed to be cheating on the official server, so they're gonna have to put a patch out. I don't know why you'd cheat in Palworld. It's like,
Yeah.
to grief people, probably, right? To like make other players not have fun, right? To just like, oh, I'm gonna have unlimited health and I'm gonna come to your base and kill you and take all your
Yeah.
stuff, and it's like that's fun.
Like you get the people in Dark Souls that appear and you're like, that guy's wearing no armor. I'm about to die.
Yeah, you're just here to grief me, right? You're gonna show up, just
Yeah.
absolutely decimate my ass, and then leave.
Naked man with a giant hammer. I'm dead. Okay.
And like, yes, I mean, to me, I don't see myself doing that. I don't see myself turning on the online because I don't really want to see other players. Like I'm working towards the goals that I'm working towards, and like that's where I'm finding the fun. So I think the fact that the game allows you to do that is pretty cool. Like I think that that's an empowering way to um give people that power of choice to kind of find the fun however they want to. And I'm sure some of these other games that I've played maybe have modes like that now too as well. Um, but I think there being like the pals also helps that, because I think running around in a world where you're supposed to have companions by yourself can feel really lonely. And the fact that like you always have like a team of pals with you, and that you like your base is always filled with NPCs running around doing little jobs and stuff, the world feels alive even though I'm by myself.
Mhm.
Good.
Yeah.
Now I had a question. I had a question. Do you know what? I've forgotten it. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. I'll probably think of it then. But I did
Last
have a
last
question
thing I'll
earlier.
last thing I'll touch on, and I mean, we can talk about it more in the weeks to come and everything. I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk about the game. I know Steve wanted to ask a little bit about the Unreal Engine 5 of it all. And I mean, I spoke about the performance. So I mean, I just do want to point out that like this is a UE5 game, and I believe it's the first UE5 game we can play on deck. And
There's a bunch of like smaller titles, but it's the
okay.
first like really big Unreal Engine 5 game that I can think of that's not Fortnite.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I I don't know how much of the kind of Unreal Engine 5 core tech is being used. Doesn't seem like Nanite's really there. I don't know if Lumen's being used. So it could be that they're just, maybe they started as an Unreal Engine 4 game and they just upgraded it and moved it over. Or it could be that they're just using it as, a standard engine and they're not taking advantage of any of that new tech. But at the very least, I'm pleased to hear that it's running well and working well, because I kind of thought that Unreal Engine 5 games were off limits at all. So I think if
Seemingly
bigger
not.
games, yeah, and if bigger games that are working with Unreal Engine 5 that maybe are using core tech like Lumen or Nanite can have in modes that kind of scale it back and scale back the way that lighting's rendered, things like that. Maybe it's possible that we'll continue to play Unreal Engine 5 games on deck for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think if this is any indication, then I would say, yeah, I feel pretty confident that at least a good percentage of them should work pretty well. Because, like I said, I've not had any crashes. I've not had any issues like that. I've even like left the game idle, like and turned it off and turned it back on. And like I've never played an online game that let me do that and didn't have it like immediately throw up. Like so, it's like it seems to run pretty solidly, for a new game made by a small studio. It makes me think that, yeah, like bigger, more experienced teams should not have a problem optimizing UE5 games for deck,
This is good.
based on this small sample size, right? So hopefully that's the case. All right, so we got some more Steam Deck conversation ahead of us in just a second. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of January. For the last time, they are Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go above and beyond and show your support just like they did, if you want to write into the show and get your thoughts right on the air, if you want to go and check out some of our sister shows, including Nintendo Noise, where we talked all about the legal issues surrounding Palworld this week, guess what? You can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places you can get involved in the community or show your support all over the web. However you choose to get involved, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. And remember, if you want to write in with your thoughts on Palworld, if you're playing the game, how you've been getting on with it, I'd love to hear from you and hear, what it is about the game that you're connecting with. Are you playing online? Are you playing it like me? I'd
It's
love
the
to hear
yellow
from
Snorlax with the big teeth that I like.
the one
It's
who is
clearly
like,
not Snorlax, but
he's like, he reminds me of My Neighbor Totoro, the Miyazaki
Yeah,
film.
yeah.
Fun fact.
Wait, I
I got
thought
him right
that
here.
was. Why did I think that was actually a Electabuzz or
Because it looks like an
Electivire?
Electabuzz and a Pikachu and a Snorlax
Oh
and
yeah, that's
Totoro,
true.
like all
Oh, there's
combined,
a
kind of.
Satu. God, yeah, they're all Pokemon, aren't they? Yeah,
Yes, they are all
I've
Pokemon,
really
yeah.
not. I've only seen like a few of them. I'm like, oh yeah, I can see how
Oh,
you
there's an
might. That
Eevee
looks a little bit
in
like
the
Pokemon. Yeah,
trailer, Gyarados.
Go
there's
watch
Mario.
Nintendo Noise and see some of the breakdowns.
Yeah, I wanted to watch it before this, but I didn't get a chance. I've seen one clip of a guy. He's got a bow and arrow and he's firing at things. And then I was like, okay, cool. So he's got a bow and arrow, whatever. Pulls out his pal and the pal's just like side arming a gat. So he's like bow and arrow, and the Pokemon just
Yeah.
comes with sorry, the pal comes with a gun, and I was like, all right,
I just unlocked an ability for there's like a little squirrel guy, and it's like he will ride around on you with a gun and shoot people. And I was like, okay, great. I guess I'm getting to the guns now. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a weird fucking choice, but we'll see. Can't wait. Because I know there's a lot of people who are like, there's some real weird animal cruelty stuff in here. And I'm like, I haven't seen any of it really yet, aside from I guess like forced labor, but like, I don't know. We'll see. It's it's dark. There's some dark stuff in this game for sure, but Pokemon is glorified cockfighting, so I don't,
Yeah,
I
it
don't know.
is.
We can't judge. People in
Yeah, and
glass
then they
houses.
also work everywhere. Like they work in like a cafe or they work to be nurses.
Yeah, they're not
Like
getting paid.
no.
No. But they don't get shot, so I think
Really
that
is. It really
definitely makes
is.
it ring a little bit differently.
And the chance he's working harder than Nurse Joy. You
Absolutely.
know it is.
Yeah, that they're the backbone of that medical system, and that's why. You know what? That's fine. We're gonna drop it there. I'm gonna throw to Steve. We'll talk about Palworld next week. And I guess your insane Pokemon theories if you want. But so what was it? 2 weeks ago, I guess, was when we had Bob on the show and we talked about the new Ayaneo device, the Next Lite, that was going to be the first non-Steam Deck portable PC powerhouse to run a version of Linux. It was going to be
Well, yeah,
using
initially it was like it's gonna run Steam OS, and then they're like, oh wait, no, it's not really Steam OS, it's Hollow ISO.
Hollow
But
ISO.
yeah.
Right. So, that that ended up, we broke that whole story down originally with Bob 2 weeks ago. So if you missed that one, you can go check it out. But there's a update on that story today because Ayaneo made a statement over on Twitter, and they announced that.
Come on, come on. I wrote it here in the document. I said Ayaneo on X, and you looked at it and you're like, I'm not calling it X.
No, I'm not calling it. I'm not
He
fucking
doesn't
calling it
just
that.
he doesn't just read what's on there. He reads, he processes, and he corrects.
Yeah. Look, the best I can give you is I'll call it the artist formerly known as Twitter if you want. We can print it, but I'm not.
No, then we just need to come up with a symbol for it, like Prince did
Yeah, that's
eventually.
what he did, and it's a
Yeah.
fucking X, and now it looks like a porn website. That's fine. Anyway, and by the way, no shame, not kink shaming. That's fine. Go watch porn, but maybe don't make your website's logo look like one unless that's what you're selling. Anyway, so Ayaneo made a statement on the artist formerly known as Twitter, and they have now announced that it's going to be shipping with Windows 11 instead. So the most notable thing about this product is now no longer true about it. I have some thoughts and some questions about this, but before I say anything else, I want to throw to you, Steve, because you were not on that episode. You did not get to talk about this story really. I read some of your thoughts for everybody, but like, what do you think about this? Are you surprised by this move? Do you think that this has anything to do with some of the legality that we ended up discussing on that episode? Like, what's your read on this situation?
So I don't think there was anything illegal with Hollow ISO. They could freely ship that. It's an open source project. They can put that on whenever they want. And maybe there's some GPL stuff in there that they'd have to provide access to the source code, but they can do that. It's on GitHub. I know they've modified it themselves. I'd imagine they can share the modifications as well. But I never really sat right with me. You're relying on Ayaneo to continue updating an open source project, which is taking components from SteamOS, which is then relying on Valve to keep publishing those components and making those open source. I never really liked it. It was a real disappointment when it came out that it was actually Hollow ISO rather than SteamOS.
Yeah, I was just
They'd have
you
been
really
they'd have
ruined
been
my day
much
with
better off using something like Bazite or whatever and putting that on here, or even just Arch. I I'm surprised they went with Windows 11. It's probably going to make the device a little bit more expensive, or at the very least, eat into their profits a little bit because they've now got to buy Windows 11 64-bit Home Edition licenses for every single one of these devices. But
Did they
considering they're
announce a
an
price
OEM,
adjustment? Are they going to make it? Are they just going to eat that cost?
I'd imagine they're just going to
well,
eat the cost. They're an OEM. They've probably got shitloads of keys that they bought.
yeah, it won't be like buying a new license every single time, will it? They'll have like they'll have bought like an enterprise level key and that will run a certain number of times, sort of thing.
Yeah, but their statement said real gamers, no gamers, and in response to this valuable feedback, we're pleased to announce that the Ayaneo Next Lite will come pre-installed with the genuine Windows 11 64-bit Home Edition operating system. So obviously people were complaining about it, but they've also said that players can still choose to install Hollow ISO on their own, and that the official website will provide Hollow ISO system images that are officially adapted and compatible for players to download and experience. So you can still
You can still
install.
do what they
You can
initially
still do
announced.
it, yeah,
Okay.
but it's still a bit of a cop out, right? It would have been nice to have an option when you purchase, like, do you want Windows? Do you want Hollow ISO? And they just shove a different SSD in there or install something different on it for you. But I guess that makes production a little bit more tricky, and they probably don't want to go down that process.
So it's real
Um,
quick. What the fuck's up with this real gamers, no gamers thing? What the hell is that?
I think that's their like tagline, and they're saying that they're real gamers, so they know what you want. So because they're real gamers, they know gamers, and so they
The
know that you
comma's what's
actually
making
want
it
Windows
confusing.
11.
Yeah, but it's like that's such a weird thing to say in this context because the actual like if you read the full statement, right? The sentence before that is following the announcement of the operating system for Ayaneo Next Lite, players and friends have shown great interest and engaged in lively discussions. Some players provided feedback indicating the continued preference for a Windows operating system. Quote, real gamers, no gamers, unquote. And in response to this valuable feedback, blah, 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 blah. So we know what you want because you told us what you want. That's nothing. That's not
I
anything. That's
I think it's just not very well like translated maybe, or
maybe.
yeah, maybe there's like some intent missed there, or it's just straight up translated, not like localized or anything like that. I also think there's some confusion there with like I think it must be a tagline, but if you don't are not aware it's a tagline, it comes off as weird. it's capitalized, so I assume that's the case. There's a comma in there, which is weird because you
Yeah,
read
no,
it.
I think you're
You don't
right
read it as real
for
gamers, no gamers. You
sure.
read it as real gamers, no gamers, and it's like, what does that mean? But yeah, it's a
Just
strange.
Very
feels like a
weird.
weird thing to say in this context,
Oh,
and
I agree.
especially
Yeah,
like, and you're probably right that it is just a victim of like poor translation. But like it is pretty funny. Like it
oh yeah.
reads very like, oh, okay, we've heard you, the real gamers. Like what you want is Windows, and it's like, okay, shit. I mean, I think I'm a pretty real gamer over here on my Linux machine, but that's fine.
Yeah, and I really don't think Windows is the right operating system for these
No, it
handhelds.
doesn't have a handheld mode. It's still bad. Like,
Terrible. And it would have bbeen such a differentiator for them against people like the ROG Ally, like Lenovo. I just it feels so strange to me that they were backpedal on this because
Yeah.
they were kind of onto something. I really am left wondering though, when the hell we get one of these? Like, why is the SteamOS installer not here yet? And is Valve ever going to release it? They've said in the past that they wanted to work with other manufacturers to kind of push them out. I'm just wondering if they've kind of changed tact internally a little bit.
I don't know. Like because like when I'm a little fuzzy on the specifics too. Maybe you can help me, Max. But like I remember when we were talking about this with Bob, like he found a page that was talking about some of the rules of like how you deploy
He
it.
was, but then after the fact, he then sent us that information where he was like, "Oh no, it is open source." Like he just missed a bit.
Right.
He was reading it as if only certain elements of it were open source, and there were certain ways you can use it. And then when he actually, after the fact, we had
Okay.
a chat. It was too late for us to do anything about it show wise, but we had a chat where he was like, "Oh, actually, I've just seen this. How I can actually get it up right now." He said, looking into this a little more, it looks like SteamOS is open source except for its Steam client program, which he says is basically the storefront. He thinks HoloISO changes that Steam client program to be a generic copyright-free version. So we were having questions about a lot of stuff, and it seems like that cleared it up.
So that's actually perfect. That gives me the context I was looking for. I wonder if that's a problem. Right? Where like, yes, it's open source and you can use it, but you need to if the thing you're not able to do without licensing is the Steam store and that the primary storefront you're running through the OS is that storefront, does that mean that you're paying a licensing fee?
As
Like
far as
where
I'm
what
aware, there's no license fee. You can pre-install any app you want on there, and maybe
why would
you
they need
can't
to use the
pre-install.
generic loader then though? Right? Like
Well,
they're
it's not a generic loader. They use a generic version of Steam that's downloaded rather than one that's custom built for Steam OS. So the Steam OS
okay.
one has additional things in there where you can modify the TDP and do things that you can only do on the Steam Deck. When you open big picture mode of the Steam client on your PC or on any other handheld, those kind of additions are omitted. You don't really have that like it used to be a cog, now it's like a
Gotcha.
battery icon that you can't modify those things. So I would imagine Ayaneo was putting just the generic version of Steam on there. Maybe they were modifying it to allow you to adapt things like TDP or the fan speed, stuff like that you would kind of expect that they have in their iOS launcher on their other handhelds. Or they could have been swapping it out for iOS. I don't know. Either way, they're still doing that work because the Holo ISO image is available on their
Yeah.
website. So I don't think there's
Right.
any legality there. I think the issue really comes down to you probably just didn't understand it. I don't really want them maintaining a custom fork of an open source project
Right.
because this company puts out 1 million handhelds a
Yeah,
year. They're going to
Yeah.
get as soon as they're on to the next one, they'll have forgotten about this in a year's time,
which we
Yeah.
and
said
it'll be
about
Yeah,
we
Bob
said
made
yeah,
on
that
the
point of
show.
like, I don't trust them to continue to support it long enough
no,
for
not
that
at
to be
all.
something that you can like really rely on. And like, yeah, it's like, I don't know. And like the reason I was bringing that up is like less to say like, is there a legal reason these don't exist as much as like, is there a roadblock that we're not thinking of?
Well, I found an article from November 10th over on PC Gamer. Dave James kind of did a bit of a breakdown. I'll put a link in the description. But it was an interview that Lawrence Yang was doing, and he said it's very high on our list, and we're working on it, which is bringing SteamOS and making it available. But a lot of the same people that would make a general install of SteamOS available are the people that are making the Steam Deck OLED work. We're hoping soon, though, it's very high on the list, and we want to make SteamOS more widely available. We'll start making it available to other handhelds with a similar gamepad controller first, and then further beyond that to more arbitrary devices. I think the biggest thing is just, driver support and making sure they can work on whatever PC it happens to land on.
Well,
Because
I
right
guess
now, it's very, very tuned for Steam Deck.
so. I guess my question there is right, and again, like I'm literally just asking questions because I don't know the answer, right? And I think it's interesting to think about, like, if I'm Ayaneo, if I'm one of these other companies, right, Raj, that are making this stuff, um, are you worried that if you are running the Steam OS that you're inviting more direct comparison to the Steam Deck, whereas like having Windows is a market differentiator that allows you to stand out? And then
Hmm.
is there potentially a concern of, you
I kind of
know,
think that would work in their benefit though, because all
does
the
it?
other devices, they come with like VRR displays, they're lighter, they're like more powerful.
Mhm.
The real thing that everyone moans about is it's got Windows 11 on it and it's horrible and no one really wants to navigate a PC with their finger or
Yeah.
a joystick because they don't have trackpads either. And then Lenovo's doing weird things with like their version of Joy-Cons. You can kind of take them off and turn them into a mouse. They're doing the differentiation on the hardware side, and I think they'll continue to do that. They'd save money by shoving SteamOS on it, and it really kind of puts a nail to one of the Steam Deck's real kind of game-changing factors, and the reason why I think it's been so successful is you turn it on, it feels like a console. If you could do that with your ROG Ally or your Lenovo Legion Go, and yeah, you might have slightly worse battery life, you got a louder fan, but the trade-off is you can play more games because it runs at a higher watt TDP and it's got a slightly more powerful chip in there. I don't know why you wouldn't as a company want to do that. I can see that's probably why Ayaneo wanted to do that. Um, but I just don't think they did the right approach. It's not ready yet. I think they should contact Valve. They should work with them and say, look, this is what we want to do. Will you work with us to do it? I could see Valve working with a smaller company like Ayaneo before they maybe work with the big guys like Asus or Lenovo.
I mean, if they do, right? Because like I don't know, like I guess I could see those companies not being super eager to jump in bed with Valve because it's like they're the company they're trying to compete with, right, in the market, and also like those companies already have a relationship with Microsoft. Like they're already, if you buy um, right, like hardware, like pre-made hardware from any of those companies, right? Like it's coming with Windows on it, right? And they're like you said, a lot of those companies probably have a deal to mass buy Windows keys and stuff like that. And there is this, I think if Windows had a handheld PC mode that worked really well and it created a seamless console like experience like we do get with SteamOS 3.5, um I don't know that there would be a big incentive for a lot of those companies to switch over, right? And I think like maybe they do see that as being valuable about being able to like have something else to offer, right? Where it's like you can play Game Pass on this thing out the box. You can do this, you can
Yeah,
do that. Like,
maybe. But there's a couple of really big things that SteamOS gives that I think people forget about. One, you've got direct access to the Steam store. You're there, your library's there.
yeah,
There's also like smaller things, right? It's got a lower footprint, so some games may even run better than they do on Windows. And the biggest thing for me that I would want that if I had one of these, because I looked at potentially getting like an ROG Ally, that would drive me mental is the fact that you can't put it to sleep when you're in the middle of a game. It just doesn't work. Windows doesn't work like that. You can't like then boot it back up and the game's there where you left off. The work that Valve put in with SteamOS to get that to function, to get that to work, and the fact that you've got really two sides of the coin. There's the desktop PC mode that a lot of people probably have never gone into, and then also the actual console side.
I
Uh,
would love to see the percentages on that. How many people like
Me
have never
too.
ever opened
Yeah.
desktop mode? I bet you it's not an insignificant number of people.
No, I think that it's yeah, the fact that I think a lot of people do just follow the supported, the verification stuff. But in my time of recently of sort of delving into other Steam Deck communities and just sort of seeing what other people are doing, a lot of the people who and I don't know, obviously it's still anecdotal evidence. A lot of people who are trying to do different things, where they're like, "Oh, I'd like to try running this, or I'd like to try running that." The response people get is just install Windows, which is odd to me. But I do wonder if the fact that they're opening it and it's Linux is putting people off, and therefore, they wouldn't even bother trying to do it because why? They only know Windows, or they don't want to start messing around and learning something
I
else.
mean, I do think that that's probably part of it because like I think that like OSs are something that people are like very weirdly tribalistic about, right? Like there is
Really?
this kind of like I'm a PC person, I'm a Mac person, I'm a Linux person, right? And it's like and like I get that too, like on some level, because I think like learning a new OS is kind of like learning a new
Phones are
language.
even worse. Come on,
Yeah,
phones are
totally.
worse. Everyone's
Totally.
like in one camp or the other, and I don't know why. It's bizarre.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like it's marketing and it's this and that and this and that, right? But it's like, like one of the websites that we are it was our one of our sources today, gaming on Linux, right? Like it's like, Team Linux in our chat, right? Is like a Linux gamer. Like there is a community of Linux people. And I think that in the same way that there are people that are like, all my stuff's on Steam and that's where my stuff is, and I don't want to mess with Epic and I don't want to mess with this. I think there probably are people that feel that way about Windows, where they're like, I already use Windows, I already know Windows. I don't want to mess around and figure out another thing. I want this to fit into the ecosystem I'm already a part of, and that like I can share things across devices and stuff, right? In the way that like my laptop and my desktop are connected and like can share things, right? Like,
That the sharing things I can understand, but for me, I've never really seen this. As much as it is a PC, I'm not doing work on it. I'm not sharing files. I'm not seeing it as that. The Steam Deck for me is a handheld console. Like I see
I
it as a
agree.
console more than a PC. And the fact that I just open it up and I go, you know what, I want to play that game. I'm going to install it, and it works because the store's told me that it works, and it does, and it's great. Or if maybe it doesn't, and I go check out ProtonDB and I can look it up. But for the majority of people, and maybe the majority of people aren't buying these things, right? Maybe the majority of people aren't buying an ROG Ally or certainly not an Ayaneo Next Lite. I
I
don't
mean, they're
think that's
not
a
right. Like
mainstream product.
that's a way. Like you think about what a minority of people it is that own the Steam Deck, and it's an even more smaller niche of people that own an alternative to the Steam Deck, right? Like, yeah, totally.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if we ever get one. Yeah, I have a feeling that's probably on the cards this year. If they were putting a lot of their resources in 2023 to get HDR support in and kind of support the OLED. If that's not coming, if we're not getting another revision in 2024, which I don't think we will, then maybe this is where they dedicate their resources to finally getting out a general release of SteamOS or working with another manufacturer to get it onto their handhelds because
It's It's really weird to me that they want that actually, though.
it's not for me because like you get the Steam store when you boot up a console in front
Yeah.
of their face, and people buy games and they get 30% on every single one.
Yeah, and, like, you're right about that, like, that's their business, right? Like,
And also,
obviously.
it annihilates Windows. Like the more people on
Yeah,
Steam,
yeah, you're
SteamOS,
you're
like it's
right,
better for them.
and I guess that does speak to the fact that, like, what you're talking about, like, if Steam is really trying to make a play here where they want SteamOS to be, like, the de facto Linux launcher and be a viable alternative to Windows for PC gamers, then, like, fair enough, and maybe that is the play. Um, but it seems kind of wild to me because it's like obviously like when they partnered with manufacturers in the past for like the Steam machines, like that didn't play out super well. And like the
Wasn't a fully baked
simplicity and the
idea though, was it?
control. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That was not a fully baked idea, really. The Steam
No,
machine.
no,
Yeah, it was a
and
product with an idea to
yeah,
carry on doing it from there, right?
and I think you're right about that. Like it's not fair to judge, how this would play out based on how that played out. But like I don't know. I guess like if I'm in their shoes, I'm looking at, well, that didn't work out so great last time. And we have the Steam Deck and we have like two versions of it at a time. And it's this super simple, controlled product that we can communicate really effectively. And we don't have a situation where some person wants to get into this ecosystem and they buy some device from Ayaneo that runs our OS and then it craps out on them and they get turned off to the market. Like, I just feel like if I'm them and I've created this niche that is so like it's this burgeoning I'd kind of want to have a little bit of that like early Nintendo quality control of like I don't think we should be like
Which
wanting to
maybe
invite
is why
people
it's
into
taken
that.
them 2 years to get to this point. It
Yeah,
might be
Mm.
why we're not seeing it
there aren't
until
the right partners
yeah.
presenting themselves maybe. Yeah. Like who's to say maybe all these companies came to them and were like, "Yeah, we're ready to do it." And they're like, "No, your product's bad." And they're like, "All right, we're going to put it out anyway," and
Yeah.
could
Or maybe
be.
there's certain things that Steam maybe they were like, "Oh, if you wanna do this, it'd be good if you had trackpads, or it'd be good if you had, XYZ feature they weren't willing to commit
Yeah,
to
that's a
because they
good
didn't
point.
see as much value in it as Steam does because it affects the design of it. It affects the way you hold it. It affects the way you use it. Stick placement, things like
They
this. You
mentioned,
know.
like, trackpad first devices too, so, like, maybe that's yeah, maybe that is it, right? That they didn't wanna spend money to increase build
Yeah.
the build cost of
Yeah.
something like this by putting trackpads on it,
Always
and
don't want to change the size of it. They don't think that users are going to respond to them because
yeah.
I'm sure there are probably, like you said about people that have never entered desktop mode, there are probably loads of people who have never touched the trackpads on their Steam Deck because they've never felt a need to, or they're just like, oh, like what do I even use this for? Because it's not immediately obvious the sort of various uses and the different things you can do. Um,
There's plenty of genres of games where, like, you're just probably not gonna come in contact with them. Like, you
exactly,
could, but
yeah.
you, like, naturally wouldn't, right? Like, if
Hmm.
you're playing a lot of indie, 2D games on your Steam Deck, you're probably not using the trackpads that often,
Yeah.
right? And, like, fair enough.
I very rarely use them in game. It really depends. Like if I'm playing like an RTS or whatever, like Age of
Yeah.
Empires, I was using them all the time. But for the majority of games, are just you don't. But they're great for navigating like the operating system when you're in
Hmm.
desktop mode. They're
Mhm.
kind of incredible, and like being able to scroll with the left one like an iPod is awesome.
I've been
Yeah.
What's the
playing. I'm playing some old like PC games, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time and Prince of Persia: Warrior
mm,
Within, and um, the menus for that are all mouse and keyboard, still. So just being able to, instead of having to use the stick, being able to just go brrr and click on the bit I need to. That was the sound that it makes, by the way. That's much nicer than having to go, oh, hang on, now I'm in this menu. I have to now, instead of controlling the game like I would expect to on a controller, I now have to switch to controlling it with a mouse and keyboard. But yeah, just having the trackpad to go click, cool, move on, great.
yeah, that was the same when I was playing Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. That's all got.
Just full named. You're not that tight. You and Oblivion aren't tight like that you can
Look,
just
I
call it
love
Oblivion,
Oblivion.
no?
There's probably some people who have no idea what it is, and they've only ever played
We're
Skyrim.
old
So
now.
I
Yeah.
want to, I want
That's true.
to, I want to prefix it with the Elder Scrolls,
Yeah, yeah,
so people
yeah.
know what the
I was
hell the
playing
game
the Elder
is.
Scrolls Arena the other day, and
Why
that
would you
Arena
do
was
that
that
to
one? No, I
yourself?
was.
That's a
I
deep
definitely
cut. That's a
I
deep cut
was.
right there. Man, I think it's Arena. I was reading about that a couple of months ago, and it's like you can, like, go through, like, the entirety of, like, Tamriel or something,
Yeah,
and it's
it's
like
the world is so big and there's, like, so many NPCs, and
fucking
I
nuts.
don't know how and why. I did a retrospective a little while ago, and I was, like, learning about this stuff for the first time, and, yeah, I was like, "This feels made up. This feels like this isn't true," but there it was. There it was.
Yeah,
Hmm.
totally nuts.
The arena was one of my favorite things in Elder Scrolls 4. I'm sad they took it out of Elder Scrolls 5. Like it was gonna be in there, but they took it out, which is really really sad.
Well, we've got Elder Scrolls 6 to come,
10 years from now, you'll get to play
Yeah,
it.
Can I
yeah.
quickly read this? I know it's
Todd's
not.
busy executive producing Indiana Jones games. He's not got time for
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls
Busy,
these
he's
days.
busy.
I know it's not
Uh,
strictly on topic, but can I just say that the games world is infinite. This is Arena. Um, and while the games manual claims you can walk from one village to another, it is actually infinite and requires fast travel to get between towns. Now, tell me that that doesn't sound like Starfield. Tell me they didn't lay the
Wow.
groundwork for Starfield in 1994.
We've come full circle.
It is
Beautiful.
achieved by combining procedurally generated content and specifically designed world spaces to create a realistic and massive wilderness. That's Starfield. Starfield was Elder Scrolls Arena.
I'm gonna say
mm,
this, Max. I really appreciate you saving your handbrake until the very end of the episode. I'm like literally, I was right there. I'm like, we're about to wrap up, but it's better because the flow of the show's done. It's good. You just get it out now.
You're lucky I've got a thumping headache and I haven't
That's the only
had.
way to keep you in line.
Yeah.
Alright, any final thoughts on this before we move out of here, right? Like, I guess for me, it's what you said, Steve. It's like, what is the future of Linux on handhelds from here? And it's like, are there gonna be other folks that end up throwing their hat in the ring, or is it just gonna be a Valve party? And like, I think honestly either of those things is okay.
I do too. I'd love to see more though. I think I really really do believe in Linux gaming, and Proton's phenomenal. And they put so much work in to get this to be such an optimized experience for handhelds that more people should be able to experience that. And if they want to
Mhm.
buy a device from ROG, or they want to buy a Lenovo or an Ayaneo device, they should be able to kind of take advantage of it. And hopefully, this is the year that people will be able to. But kind of only time will tell because I'll seem to get distracted and jump
Yeah.
onto other things.
I think I'm with you in that for me, I could not imagine using Windows full time. or as a on a handheld, just purely because it's just not there yet. I think until Microsoft puts the effort in to develop a version of Windows that works well or has really great controller interface or
You
it
need
boots
like
straight into
Xbox OS or something. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Until they do that, Linux for me is the place to be. And I say this as someone who didn't touch Linux apart from once using a Raspberry Pi until I used my Steam Deck. That now I couldn't imagine using a handheld or sort of a handheld PC without it.
It's just
everyone
come so
uses Linux
far in the
every
last couple
day.
years too. Like I remember when I was in college, like I entertained the idea of like trying to get into Linux as a platform, and it was still primitive, and it's like I think it's come so far in the last couple of years, and a lot of that has been from Valve's effort. So it's like it is exciting to think about like what when we get to the point where it can be a general launcher on a computer and like what the ceiling is from here, because I think there's a lot of devices that could, it'd be really cool to see tablets built on it and stuff like that. And like get to see smaller companies be able to, have like a more open source solution for some of this stuff. We were talking with Bob about like some of the like Android based handhelds and stuff that are out there on the market. Like imagine a new wave of those that all run on Linux and I'll take advantage of Steam and everything. And it's like, that could be really neat.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
an
I mean,
exciting future.
I mean, the Android model is kind of interesting because they have the Android open source project, but none of the Google stuff comes with it. You have to pay Google for the Google services. I mean,
Yep.
that's a possibility that happens with SteamOS. It could be that, yeah, you can have the operating system, but if you want to pre-install Steam and have Steam on there and have the ability to control TDP directly from the UI and all of that stuff, maybe that's when you've got to fork over a bit of cash to
hmm
Valve as a manufacturer.
And that might be the obvious difference between a light, which is a system that just runs as it is, there it is, and then like a more pro model where you get that control
Mhm.
because they paid more and you have to pay more, therefore.
We shall see. It'll be interesting. If y'all want to write in with your thoughts on what happened here, or like I said at the top, your thoughts about Palworld, I'm very excited to hear the community's thoughts on both of these issues. I know a lot of people in our community have experimented with Windows, have thought about some of these alternative devices and stuff, and I guess I'm interested to hear how you feel about this. Like, are you interested in getting a device that's not produced by Valve that runs on that OS? Like, what do you think are some hardware innovations that some other people could maybe bring to the table? What would it take for you to really consider another option? I want to hear from those of you who are already thinking about this stuff, because it's definitely an interesting topic, and would love to get some of the community's thoughts on the internet for next week. So remember, if you want to write in, you can find all the ways to do that, get involved in the community, or show your support on Patreon by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find all the ways to get involved, however you choose to show your support or join the community. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. All the way down there has been Max. We'll see you next week.